Welcome everyone to the Bizibuz webinar on how to improve the presentation skills of your child, particularly as it's a public holiday. We appreciate all of you dialing in. My name's Christy. I'm the founder of Bizibuz. Presentation skills and the need to communicate effectively are vital to succeeding in almost all careers, in impressing in job interviews and school interviews, and they're often part of school and university examinations. And the corollary is also true. Not working to improve your child's presentation skills may leave them feeling humiliated and embarrassed if they can't deal with the stress of public speaking when it's needed. Our expert today to lead us through this topic is Joanna Hotung. Joanna is best known among parents for having founded Kids Gallery in 1996 and later Face Productions, Star English and Mills International Kindergarten all in Hong Kong. Kids Gallery was actually the first education centre in Hong Kong to offer courses in performing arts, including theatre, drama and debating. And during her time with these organisations, she's had a hand in the development of more than 80,000 young children and been involved in more than 113 performing arts productions. Today, Joanna continues to support performing arts as a board member of the Playright Children's Play Association and the Hong Kong Arts Festival. And the Hotung Mills Foundation has just run the 7th annual London College of Music Speech Festival, in which more than 1,600 kids aged between 3 and 12 competed in a range of public speaking categories, such as verse, prose, and general public speaking. Before we dive in, though, I'd like to conduct a poll because it helps us understand which age group we should focus on, which language of presentation may be more relevant if your child attends the local school system or if they're in an ESF international school. So if you go to, I think you need to navigate to an icon that looks like a triangle, square, and circle, and it should be in the lower right-hand side of your screen. So if you click on that and then you go up to polls, you should see the polls. Chloe, can you just explain that in Chinese, just in case people are not following the English, just how to access polls?
Sure. 咁我哋咧就設立咗2個投票啦。咁大家可以去咧，你哋右下角啦嘅有個3角形正方形圓形嗰個 icon 啦。咁撳入去啦。咁有其中一個選項就係投票或者係 post 嘅。咁再撳入去嗰個選項啦，咁我哋就你就會見到咧有2條問題嘅。咁第一條問題咧就係想我哋都想了解翻咧，你哋會想知多啲關於邊一個階段嘅演講技巧啦。咁第二個問題咧就係都想問翻大家啦，咁你哋嘅小朋友咧嘅需要學習嘅或者培養嘅演講技巧咧，需要符合邊一個學制嘅要求嘅？咁大家都可以去嗰度投票。Okay, that's it. So please go ahead.
Hopefully everyone is looking at the poll.
Yeah.
So I can see some votes coming through. It looks like pre-primary and primary are roughly similar in terms of relevance. We've got a few secondary. And then again, roughly split. Maybe the local school system is winning out relative to international schools, but only just. We'll give it a minute or two. For anyone that joined late, we're just doing a poll so that we understand what topics are going to be more relevant in terms of age of child and also in terms of language. So if you go to the icon that looks like a triangle, square, and circle in the bottom right of your screen, you click on that, and then there should be a menu that pops up, and then you select polls. You can vote. Chloe, do you want to also ask about the extent to which people would like to have some support in terms of the spoken English translation into Cantonese as we go?
Okay, yes. 咁咧，今次嘅我哋嘅網上講座咧，主要嘅溝通嘅語言咧就係以英文為主啦。咁都想知道翻大家嘅英文係咪都可以即係可唔可以大家係咪可以清楚明白到我哋嘅演講嘉賓嘅英語咯？咁如果有問題嘅話咧，都可以係你都可以咧 post 翻你嘅問題啦，喺翻個 chat room 嗰度嘅。咁個 chat room 咧就喺撳右下角啦，咁其中有一個掣就係好似好多個説話嘅嗰 個 bubble 咁樣啦，咁就係個 chat with everyone 嗰度嘅。咁如果有啲咩英語上面嘅問題咧，都可以喺嗰度提出翻。Yeah. So I think we can continue.
Okay, no one has put a message in chat, so can we assume that only a small amount of Cantonese supplement is required and people are comfortable with English?
Yes, I guess so.
Okay, maybe we support just a little bit. In terms of the votes, it looks like primary is the most relevant, Joanna, with pre-primary second and secondary third, but there are parents of all age brackets here. And then under local school system versus international, we've got many more in the local school system relative to the international ESF school system. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Joanna to kick off. Maybe we start with, Joanna, if you could lead us through what are the basic building blocks of presentation skills? So where do we start with understanding what presentation skills are?
Great. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. Really nice to see all of you, especially on a public holiday. Really appreciate all these things that we do for our children, right? To come and join this this presentation. I'm happy to speak to you. I'm just going to share my deck. So thank you for that, Christine. I'm going to share my deck.
It's coming through. Yeah, we can see it.
Can you see it? Can you see that?
Yep, all clear.
Great. Okay. There will be a chance, obviously, to ask questions later, as Christy said. Please, but feel free to post your questions into the chat box as we go, so that you don't forget. Because obviously, we're talking about presentation here, so it's nice if we can interact as well, rather than just having me speak and Christy speaking. I'd love to get feedback. I'd love to discuss some of these topics with you, because it's not a very straightforward topic, and it'd be great to have some interaction in terms of how we think it's best to support all of our children with presentation skills. So just go to my first slide. Okay, so the biggest takeaway that I would really like for everyone to have today is that communication, and by definition presentation, is really, it's an everyday life skill. It's not something that we just switch on when we need to use it, or when we have an event where we need to present ourselves properly or well. Communication and presentation are fundamental life skills, and I'm going to be talking about that through the whole presentation, because I think it's just as important as many of the other things that your child will have to learn as they grow up. And this is something that, like with most things, if they learn it young, it's so much easier for them and so much more natural for them to do as they grow older. The other thing that's important in this talk is that I would like you to recognize your child for who they are. You don't have to be an outgoing, loud, noisy person to be a good presenter. If your child is quiet, introverted, would rather play by themselves, that's all fine. It's not about the personality, but it's about how you can still present yourself effectively, and you can still remain true to yourself. You can still be who you are. You don't have to change your personality or your character or anything like that. But you can still be a very, very effective presenter. And you can stay natural, and it's something that you can grow up with without being afraid of, without fearing situations where you do perhaps have to give presentations in public. And the other thing that I just want to remind all of us, because I think it's very easy for us, we sort of fall into a trap. We think that presentation skills means being able to be a good speaker. We tend to focus on being a good speaker, and whatever that means. A good speaker has nice pronunciation, they have good diction, they articulate their words well, they get their message across. Yes, of course, speaking is particularly important in communication and presentation, but the other 3 skills are just as important. They're just as important. Thinking is very important because if you're speaking, you should be thinking about what you're trying to convey. And obviously thinking plays a large part in planning for presentations. Listening is so important. You have to know how to read the room. You have to get signals from other people as to whether they're listening to you or not. Why are they listening to you? Why are they not listening to you? And also we have to listen to others to fully understand what it is that they're trying to communicate with us. And then non-verbal is important. Non-verbal, the things that we don't say. So these could be our bodily gestures. It could be our facial expressions. It could be smiling. It could be frowning. It could be the way we use our hands. I mean, I feel like I can't talk without my hands. You'll probably see my hands waving around. It's just part of who I am when I speak. My hands are important when I speak to me. So non-verbal communication is really important as well. And it helps you to make connections with other people, which is the whole point of communication. It's building connections. So these are the sort of overriding areas, the foundational areas that I'd like to build upon in this talk.
Joanna, would you say the emphasis on these 4 different communication skills you have on the slide are different if we're talking about a monologue style presentation where a child is presenting to a group versus, say, something that tends to be much more interactive, like a one-on-one interview? What are the different emphases of the skills that are involved?
I think all 4 are involved in every kind of presentation. So obviously, if you're speaking to one person or you're speaking to 500 people in a huge seminar room, that's a different, it's a different way of communicating. But actually, the fundamentals are still the same. If you're talking to one person, you really want to make a connection with that one person. But if you're talking to 500 people, you also want to connect with 500 people. You don't just want to resonate or talk to 1 or 2 people in that room. You want to connect with all 500. So how do you do that? You use all of these 4 skills. And of course, you might prepare differently. The content of your presentation might be different. But all of these are just as important. And I mentioned earlier that it's very important to know who you are, what your personality is like, and also to behave naturally. Even if you're giving a really important presentation to very important people, and there's lots of people there, you will connect much more effectively with people if they can see who you are. If they can see who you are as a person, they will remember you more, and they will remember your words more. Right? So I think, and who we are all of these 4 things. All of these 4 areas make up who we are, which is, so I think it's equally important. Okay, I'm going to...
Do we want to give Chloe a chance just to talk about the...
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
Maybe 2 key takeaways, Chloe. Don't spend too long on it. To summarize, what are the overarching takeaways here?
Yeah, so 咁樣咧頭先 Joanna 啱啱就講到啦，咁如果咁小朋友啦喺或者大家啦喺溝通上面咧，咁如果係面對住唔同嘅面對住好多觀眾啊，例如可能500人嘅觀眾啦，或者可能單對單上面嘅溝通咧，我哋需要牽涉到或者涉及到嘅溝通技巧咧都有4種嘅，就有思考啊，都要諗下你想表達嘅嘢嘅內容啦，同埋要聆聽啦，同埋説話啦，同埋語言上面嘅表達嘅。咁其實每個嘅無論你係對住500個人啦，或者係你對住咁單對單咧，都會牽涉到呢4個溝通技巧啦。咁其實最重要咧，都係要做翻自己啦。咁如果你自己係比較好似 Joanna 咁樣講嘢嘅時候咧，想需要牽涉到多啲嘅身體語言咧，咁樣其實係都 OK， 但係最重要都係要令自己舒服咯。OK， please go ahead.
Thanks. Okay, so everyone here obviously thinks presentation ability is important. I think it's absolutely critical. These are the reasons. I mean, there's many, many reasons why it's important to be good at presenting yourself. These are some of the most important reasons here. I think as parents, we can look at these and we probably agree on all of these. Some of the ones that I'd like to pick out are the connection, the human connections aspect. The point of presenting and communicating is to make connections with other people. That's really important. Teamwork has become increasingly important now. At most schools now, a lot of projects are done in teams. When we go to work, much of our work now, a large part of our work is done through collaborative teamwork. Much less emphasis on individual people having to come up with all of the answers. It's just not the way that the workplace behaves anymore. Leadership, we talk about leadership a lot, but it's a different kind of leadership than perhaps some of us grew up with. It's not the leadership where the boss knows everything and tells everybody what to do. It's leadership where individuals can supervise different projects, where they can have different leadership skills to motivate people rather than just organizing information, for example. So leadership is a critical skill as well that is a wonderful thing to instill in our children when they're young. Empathy, very important. Understanding how other people are feeling and responding accordingly. It's important in life, it's important in our families and our personal relationships, but it's also important at work, at school and at work. So, and obviously we all know where the world is going. I mean, I don't know how many of us here use ChatGPT, but it's here to stay. And all of the other AI platforms that are sort of blossoming all around. We can't fight these, they are here to stay, and they can be incredibly useful to our children, at school even, in university, for us at work, they can be very useful. But we, as humans, must differentiate ourselves. The world does not need more humans who behave like robots, right? The world needs humans who behave like humans and use human skills. And communication, I think, is the foundational human skill that will enable us to actually move forward more successfully.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
If you feel that like if anyone here would like a Chinese translation of what I say, please just put your hand up or put a message in the chat. Just because I obviously the Chinese characters are here, but if you would like anything sort of further explained, please just mention it as we go.
Chloe, do you want to also mention that?
Yeah, sure. Maybe for each slide later on, I can just give a brief summary there. That would be easier. Anyway, so can possible to go back to the previous slide?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.咁 Joanna 啱啱都提到啦，咁其實點解我哋點解演講技巧係咁重要咧？我諗其實好多家長都認同呢一個 slide 上面講嘅嘢嘅，咁其實最主要咧都係希望大家可以希望小朋友啦，同埋我哋之後佢成長咗大個咗咧之後都會建立到信心啦，同埋最重要嘅就係要加強同人與人之間嘅聯繫啦。咁另外咧喺而家嘅現今世界入邊咧出嚟做嘢咧，咁團隊合作精神啊，都非常之重要嘅。咁其實演講技巧都可以令到小朋友啊，或者佢成長咗之後嘅團隊嘅合作技能咧，會比較會發揮得比較好啲啦。咁另外咧就係其實演講技巧咧都會牽涉到你嘅 leadership skills 啊，你嘅領導能力嘅。咁但係呢個領導能力咧，其實唔係講到話好似要老細啦。喺公司入邊咧要 order 每個同事要做啲咩咁樣，而係希望透過 演講技巧咧，可以鼓勵到你身邊嘅人一齊去做嘢，一齊發揮到團隊合作精神咁樣啦。咁另外啦，點解我哋需要培養到我哋嘅演講技巧咧？咁就係希望大家都可以有到一個共情能力啦，咁可以更加清楚唔同人之間嘅感受啦，咁樣嘅。咁另外最撈尾就係而家喺現今嘅世界入邊咧，AI 擔當住非常之重要嘅角色啦，咁特別可能有 ChatGPT 啊咁樣，因為呢啲咁樣嘅工具啦，都改變咗我哋平時日常嘅溝通模式啊，又或者係做嘢嘅模式嘅。咁如果要喺未來嘅 AI 世界入邊啦，我哋人類啦，我哋咧咁同 AI 嘅唔同嘅地方就係我哋希望我哋可以真係做翻個人類啦。咁同 AI 唔同嘅地方就係我哋可以同人與人之間嘅溝通，會係可以係啦，就係人與人之間嘅溝通就係可以 differentiate 喺呢個 AI 嘅世界入邊嘅。OK，
thank you, Claire. So how can my child develop presentation ability? So I've structured this slide so that we can match things that children can do and things that parents should allow them to do or encourage them to do. So the first one I've put is speak up, and I put this here because I've put, what parents can do is to allow children to speak. Don't anticipate their every wish. What I mean by this, and I hopefully you can appreciate this, but I remember when my children were young, they wanted to do things by themselves, but it was so frustrating watching them do it. Like if they want to put on their own shoes, but we're in a hurry to leave the apartment, and watching them put on their own shoes because it takes so much time, and they put it on the wrong foot, and then they go, the child is completely fine. They're engaged in the activity, but it's the parent who's like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And then we do it for them. So, and it's the same thing with allowing our children to speak. We don't have to anticipate everything. So I noticed, for example, a lot of parents are always checking if their child needs to drink water, or checking if their child is cold or hot. Put on your jacket, take off your jacket. We don't need to do that. If our child is thirsty, they can tell us. If our child is cold, they can tell us. They can ask for things. They can learn to speak up for themselves. They are individual human beings. So I start with that message because, I'm a parent too. We tend to just try and smooth things along, make things easier, make things faster. But actually we are not allowing our children the opportunity sometimes to speak and communicate for themselves. We want them, they should ask for what they need and want. They should ask for it. We need to learn patience. It's difficult to be patient. We need to be patient. And we also need to listen actively. Sometimes they don't have the vocabulary. Sometimes we don't really know what they need. But we have to allow them to try and express. And then we support them when they need us to. We don't anticipate everything. And then, because I said at the beginning that communication is a life skill, we shouldn't treat communication as something that we just prepare for sometimes when we need to. We should create an environment where it's all about communication. And of course, the environment has to start with our family, our home. And later it will be school, it'll be kindergarten and primary school and secondary school, and it will be the wide world. But our families and our homes are really important. So how do we get our children to speak, to listen, to think, right? And give us the non-verbal cues. Let's encourage them to tell stories and jokes. Let's have fun. But how does your child tell stories unless we read them stories, right? Encourage them to play word games. Children love games. They want to play them all the time. It's sometimes really annoying for us as parents because the child wants to read the same book, hear the same story again and again, right? But that's what we can do with them. We can play games and puzzles. Word games are fantastic. Let them draw their ideas. How do children think? They think through drawing, through mark making, through talking, all sorts of ways. So offer them multimedia to explore. It's not bad to give your child an iPad. It's not a bad thing to do as long as you know why you're doing it. But also give your child, paper and crayons and pencils and all sorts of things. Let them explore. Role play. Role play. Children love to play make-believe. They love to give them props and costumes. Help them to role play, whoever they want to be. We can ask our children open-ended questions. An open-ended question is a question that does not end with yes or no. So don't ask them questions that end with yes or no. Ask them open questions and encourage them to reply. Encourage them to reply. So instead of saying, shall we go to the park? Because the answer to shall we go to the park is yes or no. Don't say that. Say to your child, what would you like to do today? And you can give them some options. We could go to the park, we can go to the playground, we can go, give them some options, but allow them to answer you. And of course, practice. But when I talk about practice, I don't mean practice like piano practice, right? I don't mean like you sit down for half an hour and you practice how to communicate. I don't mean that at all. I mean practice through all of these different activities that we have here. Keep practicing. It's an ongoing activity that your child should be exposed to. And also, when they're practicing, don't criticize them. Don't tell them to pronounce this properly or fix their grammar or it really is very discouraging. Even if what they're saying is very long-winded and just going on and you really can't understand half of what they're saying, it's fine. They're figuring it out. They're working it out in their own heads. So allow them to do that.
Joanna, could we talk a little bit more about telling stories and jokes? Because I feel like these are two of my favorite tools in terms of making a presentation or a communication more engaging. I feel they just really enhance that connection that you can build with your audience. But I also feel like I'm quite bad at them and my youth has been misspent for not getting better at them. And I actually recently read a book by a guy called Mitch Earlywine, and he is this really interesting combination of a psychologist and a stand-up comic.
Right.
And his book is called Learning to Be Funny. And his takeaway is that there's a psychology to humor and you can actually teach kids and adults to be funny. And, I think it's a great tension breaker. It's a really, really good way to win over an audience. Do you have any good advice for teaching kids how to be funny or how to tell better stories? I mean, my own daughter is very long-winded when it comes to stories. And I think most kids are, and there's also a structure to jokes and there's a structure to telling stories. Like, how do you teach someone that through classes? I mean, how do you help your kids get better at those skills?
So the easiest way to teach jokes, and I'm not a good joke teller either, but the easiest way to tell jokes is to start with repetitive jokes, right? So it'd be interesting if anyone here can share if there are Chinese or local equivalents, but like, knock knock, the knock knock jokes, right? So some of you may be familiar with the knock knock jokes. Knock knock, who's there? And then you say something, and then you say something, and that's the joke. And it always follows the same pattern. Or there's another repetitive joke, like, why did the chicken cross the road? That's a repetitive joke. And then there are multiple answers. Now, the thing that's important with children is their answer doesn't actually have to be funny in the way that we adults think. It just has to be funny to them, right? So if you can say, but the point is that they are coming up with the answer. So we could say to a child, why did the chicken cross the road? And the child might say, because they wanted to go to McDonald's. Great. Now, and the child will laugh because to them that's meaningful. Okay, I'm talking about younger children here. and they will put their own ideas into these jokes, which is great because I think that's really creative as well. But from a parental point of view, obviously the thing to do is to laugh, because it is funny, because they didn't make that up by themselves. It is genuinely fun. We're not being fake. It's not fake laughing, right? But then as they get older and the children really understand the point of a joke, they understand a pun, or they understand, the current events that might be related to that joke, of course. But you just set them up in the right way so that they have these tools at their disposal, and they're also thinking by themselves as to how they can actually participate and they can create these jokes for themselves.
Okay, got it. The other thing that I've encouraged, because I think young kids are often really fascinated with humor,
Yeah.
and I think a part of that is the connection that they can see in the response they get from people when they tell a joke, and I've actually bought my kids little joke books, like books that contain jokes and also, have some tips on how to deliver jokes. And then the other thing we do is I'll say, okay, you've practiced it on daddy. How about you go and practice on someone else? That same joke. And they see if they can get more of a response, a bigger laughter, that kind of thing is something that I've tried as well.
And don't forget, a lot of joking is visual, right? Yeah. And it's funny that, why do children love to look at, go to parties where they have, clowns and people doing silly things? I mean, they're slipping on a banana peel. They're making silly gestures and pulling faces. I mean, it's very visual, but it's funny. It's funny for children. And again, they may not be speaking, but it's the nonverbal communication that's going on there and that gets the children laughing.
Okay, great. Chloe, do you want to do a very, very brief Chinese version?
Yeah. Yes, let me try. 咁其實咧，咁家長啦，或者咧小朋友咧，應該可以點樣培養翻佢哋嘅演講技巧啦？咁其實最重要嘅就係俾小朋友自己去嘗試，同埋俾小朋友去大聲去講翻佢自己心入邊想講嘅嘢啦，咁而唔係可能家長每一步都預計翻小朋友下一步想做啲乜嘢咁樣，因為如果小朋友佢哋肚餓啊或者想飲水嘅話，佢哋都會可以自己去講翻出嚟嘅。咁另外仲有玩啊，都非常之重要啦。咁同埋溝通咧，其實係最緊要係喺屋企開始嘅，咁例如可能你可以同翻小朋友去講翻啲故仔啦，咁因為如果你唔講故仔嘅話，佢哋又點可以自己去學識去講故仔咧？同埋可以如果同小朋友去問一啲問題嘅時候咧，盡量去避免一啲係或者唔係嘅 yes no question 啦，而係嘗試一啲開放式嘅問題，俾佢哋去發表下自己嘅唔同嘅意見咁樣嘅。咁另外啦，Christy 都問到啦，咁其實想小朋友去學下點樣去講下一啲笑話啊咁樣咧，其實係都有方法嘅。咁最重要就係咧，俾佢哋咧不斷咁樣去試或者去講翻同樣嘅笑話，咁可以俾嘗試多啲咧，咁佢哋就會放膽多啲去做啊，同埋去develop 一個去笑話嘅或者係啦笑話嘅説話技巧嘅。Okay, maybe next slide.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about younger children first, and then later I'll move to talking about older children. So how can my young child get started? And I truly believe that as soon as a child is born, they're already communicating, right? Or they're trying to, and we're trying to communicate with them. So it really is a case of starting as young as you possibly can. So, these are some of the techniques and the things that we can do as parents with young children to make them comfortable with language, to make them comfortable sharing their language with other people inside the family and outside of the family. Telling repetitive stories. So young children love repetition. They love to hear the same story over and over again. It makes them feel safe. It makes them feel happy. They are interested. They don't get bored. They love to know what comes next. They, you know, the first time you read them the story, they won't know, but the second time they will know what the second little pig does, or what the third little pig does, and they will love it because they will feel proud that they know what's coming next. But it's not just about the story. What you're teaching is you're teaching sequence. You're teaching beginning, middle, and end. That something happens at the beginning, and then something else happens, and then there's some conclusion. So that's a really important skill for children to learn, and they can learn it very, very early. Talking about things that are important to them, things that they enjoy, their favorite toys or books or pets or other people. They can, you know, they can talk about their grandma, they can talk about auntie. Some schools, a lot of schools have introduced show and tell. Show and tell is a great activity at school where the child can bring something and talk about it, and there's usually a structure. And again, the structure is important. They usually follow a list of questions. Today I've brought this, and this is what it is, and who gave it to me, and what it can do, and why do I like it? Something like that. And again, it's easy for them to follow the structure. They're talking about an object they know and that they love. So the content is actually easier for them to think of. Other things that are important is their children. Allow them to use whatever toys or props or visuals that they like. Allow them to dress up. Allow them to wear funny glasses. Allow them to wear a hat if they like. It's all part of them understanding how they can present themselves in different ways. So just, you know, that's really important. Imagination. Don't tell your child that's silly or that doesn't make sense. Or don't allow, it's okay. Don't worry that they can't tell the difference between make-believe and, you know, what's real and unreal. It doesn't matter. It's fine. They can talk about princesses and they can talk about their sister in the same sentence, and it's completely fine. The point is that they are thinking and they are talking and they are communicating. I talk about patience a lot because I think as parents, that's a difficult one for us. Try and really listen to them. Try and support them as a good audience member. Again, it sometimes requires patience, but it also teaches them how to be a good audience member as well, and listen to you and listen to other people when other people are communicating. And show them you're listening by asking questions. And when you listen, don't listen looking on your phone because they will know. They will know that you're not listening. And I mean, again, very difficult. It's very difficult. But try when you're listening to actually listen to what they're saying and ask relevant questions rather than just going, yes, okay, because they know that you're not really listening. And then give feedback. Give good feedback, support them, say, that was fantastic. I love the way that you said that. That was great. Because that's what makes them want to do it again and do more of it. Chloe?
Oh, sorry, just a minute. I have a question actually, Joanna, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was wondering, you talk a lot about nonverbal. For young kids, that's often more challenging. I mean, they fidget. I found when my kids were young, they're now 9 and 11, one thing, and actually, to be honest, they still struggle with this a bit, is making eye contact.
Yeah.
If they're having this communication or they're presenting. I mean, how much emphasis should there be for young kids on the non-verbal side of communication? Or is that something for older kids? Is that a more sophisticated set of skills? How do you think about that for young kids?
I think with young kids, it's really important to recognize that when you give them instructions, they don't necessarily hear them in the way that we say them. So if you say to a young child, you have to look at people when you talk to them, right? Which is, we always say that. You say, when you talk to someone, look at them. But they don't hear it in that way. It doesn't resonate with them. You have to think of a way to deliver that message. So for example, and all children are different, but for example, you might say to a child, okay, who are you telling this story to? So it's an open-ended question. Who are you telling the story to? Make them think about it. And then they might say, I'm telling the story to you. You go, oh, fantastic. I really want to hear your story. But when you tell your story to me, you have to look at me. Otherwise, I don't know that you're telling the story to me, right? So you turn it into a scenario that they understand and that they can connect with, and then they go, oh gosh, okay, mummy doesn't know I'm telling her the story unless I look at her, right? For example, that's an example. And then they internalize that much more. Whereas, you know, the kind of information that we keep sort of nagging our children, which is nagging, and it comes across as nagging, and no one responds well to nagging, right? It just doesn't land as successfully. So it's for us to be a little bit more creative and think about how can I explain this to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or whatever they are, that makes them understand it.
I don't know if we've had a huge amount of success with this approach, but we basically said it's about being polite. So if you're saying something to someone, A, they won't know that you're talking to them if you're looking down at your feet and you're just speaking. And then B, it's viewed as rude. And so we tried to explain it that way to make it a little bit more of an etiquette point. Do you think that works?
I 100% agree with you about the good manners aspect. I'm going to talk about that actually later. But it doesn't always work because sometimes they just don't want to have good manners in that moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's not fun or interesting to them. Whereas if they have this story in them that they want to tell you, they have it in them that they want to actually tell you this story, right?
Yeah.
So the good manners part, we'll talk about that later. Absolutely. But again, it sounds a little bit more like a lecture, like, oh, you should do this, rather than making them want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Chloe.
多謝晒 Joanna 嘅分享啦。咁樣咁小朋友年幼嘅小朋友咧，可以點樣培養到佢哋嘅演講技巧啦？咁首先就係小朋友咧，其實佢哋好中意聽到一啲重複嘅故仔咁樣嘅。咁其實可以由講一啲重複嘅故仔開始啦。咁咁樣透過重複嘅故仔咧，可以令到佢哋咧更加了解到順序故事內容嘅順序次序啦咁樣嘅。另外咧都有一啲可以喺屋企啦或者喺學校嗰度咧，佢哋都會玩過一啲 activity 就叫做 show and tell 啦。咁通常咧老師或者家長可以咧俾一個內容嘅次序嘅 structure 俾佢哋啦，咁等佢哋咧揀自己中意嘅玩具啊，或者中意嘅嘢去演講或者去表達翻佢透過呢一個順序啦，去描繪翻呢一個東西啊，或者呢一個玩具咁樣嘅。另外當然啦，都要俾耐性啊，或者去keep 住去鼓勵翻小朋友去發揮佢自己嘅創意啊，同埋去講多啲嘢咁樣啦。咁另外啦，同埋最緊要嘅就係咧，當小朋友去發表緊佢哋自己嘅意見嘅時候咧，盡量真係去 focus 翻佢哋啦，同埋去盡量去俾耐心去聆聽佢哋講嘅內容嘅，而唔係可能一邊玩住手提電話，另外一邊就咁樣，係咁樣就聽個小朋友啦。咁另外咧 ，Chrissy 都有問到啦，如果咁小朋友啦，佢屋企嘅小朋友咧就比較當説話或者同其他人講嘢嘅時候咧，都未必可以做到有一個眼神嘅交流或者眼神嘅接觸咁樣嘅。咁其實我哋可以點樣可以提翻小朋友咧，去做翻呢一啲咁樣嘅非言語上面嘅表達啊，或者身體嘅語言啦，咁其實可以代入翻佢哋嘅處境啦，例如可能問翻一啲問題啦，就係問翻佢哋究竟你係同緊邊一個去講嘢啊？咁如果你係唔知喎，咁如果你係同我講緊個 story 咧，講緊個故仔咧，你可以同我去問翻住我啦，咁令到呢一個語境或者係場景令到佢哋更加去了解到呢一個身體語言嘅重要性咁樣嘅。Yes.
Sorry, just a quick reminder, we do want this to be interactive. So if anyone has any questions at any point, I know you don't have access to your microphones, but you can go to the chat area and that icon should be on your lower right of your screen. It looks like a square and it's got some horizontal lines through it. So feel free just to put any questions that you have there. we can either address them as we go or at the end. Sorry, Joanna, over to you.
Okay. Okay. So a lot of the time, we as parents, we're worried because our child is shy or quiet or, doesn't speak up. And it's something that concerns us because we feel like our child really should be speaking up more. And this is something that I feel quite strongly about. This word shy, I believe, and this is something maybe we can discuss at the end as well. I believe that communication should be a family rule. I don't think it should be optional. I think that strong communication in a family should be something like brushing your teeth. It's non-negotiable. You have to brush your teeth. Whether you like it or not, you have to brush your teeth. So,
actually, on this point, Joanna, so we have some rules in our household, and maybe these sorts of rules might be a good example here. For example, at meal times, we make sure that adults don't have electronics for a start. And then secondly, we have communication happen. And I know sometimes it's difficult when, especially the children are really young and you're just focused on getting the food in the mouth. It's a little difficult to do this then, but we do try to at least ask them one question and have them talk back rather than have it, a conversation just amongst the adults. So we really encourage our kids at the table to talk. And the other thing that we do when we go out for meals, we actually require our kids to place their own order with the waiter and waitress. Now they're 9 and 11, I was saying. We've been doing it for a couple of years and it did not come naturally. So it was something that we just had to do again and again and again. And initially they were really shy. They didn't want to speak up. We would say, well, if you want a tissue or you want a glass of water, then you have to ask yourself. So we would refuse to order it for them. And all of these things just became, now it's accepted. Okay, if I want something, I have to ask for it myself. And we all talk at the dinner table or at lunch when we're eating together. So I agree. I think if you can build it into your normal family routines, it just becomes very natural and very expected.
Yeah, and this is exactly my point about, I do notice a lot of parents, they make excuses for their children's behavior by using the word shy. So we, for example, we ask our children to greet, if you bump into your friend in the street and we say to our child, oh, say hello to Auntie somebody. And then, a lot of children don't want to do it. Sort of shrink away. And often parents will, maybe the parent feels embarrassed. Often our children do not do what we want them to do, which may be embarrassing. But also parents then make the excuse. They say, oh, my child is shy. Now, I think that's a big mistake, especially if you say it in front of the child, because you're giving your child an excuse not to have to communicate. And then they can tag on to that and they know that you will always rescue them when they don't want to do that. And personally, I think that is a mistake because as Christy said, you need to set up in your family, and it may be different in different families, but you need to set up your rules, right? And your rules, I think all of us agree, one of the rules is you must brush your teeth, which is why I put it there. Other families may have different rules, but I believe that the rule is if someone greets you, you must greet them back. It is a rule, whether you feel like or not. Now, of course, I'm not saying we fight the battle every time. Of course, sometimes, you pick and choose, but it is still a rule. So, and that is the foundation. If you can get your child to always greet people, whether they feel in the mood or not, that's a huge step. And then you keep that in the home. Yeah, you can have the rules at home. It's difficult for parents. No phones is a great ideal. It's not always possible. But one thing you can do is you can talk to each other when you eat, right? Try and talk to each other when you eat. Or if you can't eat together because of work schedules or whatever, then you find another time, maybe just before bed or sometime, but you communicate. And if you don't really know, sometimes you don't really know what to talk about, right? It's always good. This is a great thing I used to do with my children. We call it thorns and roses, but I mean, it's just one good thing that happened today and one bad thing that happened today. That's all you start with. Everyone go around the table, one good thing that happened, one bad thing that happened. And it's great because it helps the child to think, and we all need to think. And then the child can explain what it is. But parents, you must play too. Parents must play too. Okay, so if your child says one good thing was, I got a good mark on my maths test, great. Bad thing was, oh, I had a fight with my friend at school. Okay, so these are the things that the child's speaking about, and you can discuss them. After the child has said those things, you can praise the child, or you can discuss. You can say, oh no, what was the argument about? What did you have, what happened, right? This is how you develop the conversation. But as an adult, when it comes to your turn, you share the reality of your day. Oh, the good thing was I had a really nice lunch with my friends, and we went out and we had this nice lunch. Oh, the bad thing was that I got some bad news about something at work. I mean, you don't have to share inappropriate information depending on the age of the child, but share. Have them understand your life as well. It's good for all sorts of reasons. So yeah, 100% agree with Christy. And the key thing here is don't make excuses for your child and expect them to have good communication. Don't ask them to. If you ask them to do something, they may say no. Or they may argue with you or fight with you, or you might get into some, issue. Just create an expectation. So I expect you to brush your teeth every night. I know you don't feel like doing it tonight, but there's no point arguing because you're going to have to do it anyway, right? So just brush your teeth. Do exactly the same thing with communication. Yeah? I expect you to greet people. I expect you to answer when someone asks you a question. I expect you to, to say something in this kind of situation. That's a really, really important. If you can teach your child that when they're young, they may not like it, and you may find it quite difficult, but it's such a gift. That is a gift that you give your child for the future, because it becomes a habit. It becomes a habit. And with a habit, we can always do it. Like we, as adults, often we have to go and speak or go to an event or go to a dinner or go to something that we don't really want to go. But we go because we have to, and we can communicate, and we can do a very good job when we're there because we are trained to. We have that habit, but it's very difficult for us if we don't have that training when we're young. So I really emphasize this point. I'm not going to go through all the bullet points because obviously you can see those for yourself, but that's the main message from this slide.
I have another question, Joanna. Let's say you have a really shy child, and and you really want them to develop presentation skills, and beyond the family routines that you can develop that are supportive, would you recommend enrolling them in a debating class or even signing them up for speech festival? They're really scared of public speaking and they'll fight you on it and they won't be happy. How would you handle that? Do you think that's a good thing to do? I'd love your view.
Yes, sorry, I've just seen a message actually from Doris, which maybe you can have a look at that, Christy,
yes.
while I answer your question.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, being shy is completely fine. It's not bad to be shy. We don't want our child to feel bad because they are a quiet, shy child. That really is something that is completely fine, and we accept that. So how do we help them then to still present? Because we still have an expectation, right? We're still building an expectation that the child has to communicate. So I think the best way to do that is to put them in situations sometimes where they do feel uncomfortable. And yes, it may be enrolling them at a learning center, but of course you need to pick the right learning center for your child who really understands your child. It might be enrolling them in other things that perhaps we don't think of for communication, but for example, enroll them in sports, enroll them in activities that are fun, where maybe the end goal is not to talk, the end goal may be to play football or do gymnastics or something, but it's still very important because it's getting them out. It's helping them to develop skills outside of themselves, getting them to interact with other people, getting them to advocate for themselves. Sometimes they have to tell the teacher what it is that they need or want. So I do believe that's really important. And I think the most exposure possible for your child is really important. I was a very, very shy child. I
Shy, actually. Yeah. Look at us now.
Because now we can't stop talking. I mean, but I was a very shy child, but I had parents who insisted on putting me out there so that I would feel uncomfortable, and I resisted at times. I didn't want to do it sometimes. I really didn't. I love reading. I want to stay at home and read my book. But no, because they recognize that it's so important to be able to communicate. So they helped me to overcome that resistance that I had through various ways.
Yeah, actually, the way my parents did it with me was I learned a musical instrument, and then as part of that, we had the Eisteddfods. We had lots of performance that we had to do, and I have to say, as a shy child, I really didn't enjoy it when I was that age. I found it very difficult because not only do you have that physiological response where you don't have steady hands, you can't breathe properly, like all of those really uncomfortable physical experiences I was having, and I found it really difficult to play music well when all of those things were going on. So it definitely taught me to get more comfortable with that discomfort. And I do think that in the long run, it's helped me enormously, but I have to be honest, I didn't really enjoy going through performance then. And now I perform all the time. My preference is to do it in groups rather than solo, but I still do a lot of music performance now, and it's a non-event for me. So, I think there's a development that is a really positive thing if you can, expose your child to a range of different activities. Doesn't have to be debating, doesn't have to be speech festival, but I think these things can help them come out of their shell and just get more comfortable in their communication skills or their presentation skills, or managing the non-verbal part of it gets better over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the slide before, I actually mentioned, where do I put it? Somewhere. I talk about being mindful. Can't remember where I put it. It was the shy child. Yeah, the second last point, teach mindfulness. Oh yeah, sorry, it's here. Yes, I mean, we can't get into obviously mindfulness now, but one of the core concepts of mindfulness, which is incredibly helpful for children and adults, is to label the feeling that you are feeling, label the emotion that you are feeling, and recognize it. It's okay. So actually call it, name it. Say to your child, I know you feel really nervous, or ask your child to name it. How do you feel right now? I feel really scared. It's fine. You're scared. Name it. It's okay. Mummy feels scared too. A lot of times I also feel scared. Daddy feels scared. Your teacher feels scared. Everyone feels scared sometimes, or nervous, or whatever it is that they're feeling. And by labeling it, it immediately helps, because you're kind of like packaging it. It's not just this sort of out of control feeling. And, with children, with very young children, the reason very young children have tantrums and, is because they can't control their feelings, right? The feelings have really overwhelmed them. So if you can help your child to have self-control with their feelings and to recognize this is just a feeling, everyone has this feeling, I'm naming it, and it's okay, I can handle this. That's a very good start in terms of controlling that fear. And then later I'll talk about a couple of ways, sort of physiological ways to help yourself as well if you're feeling nervous.
Actually, we have a question here, and it's in relation to a young child that's shy. So I think it's probably a good time to raise it. I think most people can either read it on the message or just very briefly. It's about a 3.8-year-old girl who's observant, but she's not good at talking to strangers. The parents have been encouraging her to say hello for a couple of years now to her teacher, who she likes, and also to security guards. So these are probably people that she sees quite frequently, and still she doesn't really like doing it. Still she's shy. And so they ask, and they've tried a number of different techniques, like using a sticker wall, just constant reinforcement, trying to get the child to speak to these people, but she's still resistant. What can they do? What else could they do to try to help the child?
So I guess my question to you would be, What would you do if you had exactly the same situation, but she refuses to brush her teeth? Right? So by the way, I really recognize this because this is a very common problem, and I'm definitely not saying this is easy, but I would just ask you, what would you do if your child refused to brush her teeth every evening? What would you do? And, because I don't know what you would do, but actually, whatever you would do about that, I believe you should apply the same principle to this, right? You're asking her, you're encouraging her to do this, and then you're allowing her not to, right? You're allowing her not to. So maybe it's time to actually have some more reinforcement. Maybe there needs to be some consequences, right? If maybe there needs to be a way of showing her this is something that you have to do.
Joanna, for example, if there was a security guard there at their apartment complex, for example, I guess maybe the parent could go with her to speak to the security guard or say hello and greet them and not leave until she says something.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a very difficult situation. And you see, what's happened is she's got into the habit of not having to do it, right? Because it's now been 2 years. So she's got into the habit of not having to do it. And so we have to break a habit, right? It's like biting nails or any habit. We have to break the habit now. So breaking a habit is quite difficult. And it sounds very, very harsh. I know I sound harsh when I say, maybe there has to be a consequence, right? Obviously, you've tried multiple things. So maybe you need to think of a different strategy that involves something like, what Christy just said. Maybe you can say to her, we're going to go and say hi to so-and-so. Prepare her, don't spring it on her. You prepare her, you say, it's really important that you speak to people. It's not okay that you don't speak to people, right? Just tell her it's not okay. You have to speak to people when they speak to you. And then say, we're going to go and say hi to, whoever, Sup Sup or whoever. We're going to go say hi to him. And you are going to say hello to him, right? And then there may have to be a consequence if she doesn't do it. And, this is why this kind of discussion is really great to have a number of parents here, because I know when I say it like this, it sounds harsh. But trust me, it's a breakthrough when she does say hi. And you're not breaking her spirit. You're not, it's nothing like that. You are showing her that there are some things in life that have to be done, whether we like it or not.
Mm.
And this is one of them. This is one of them. And it is that one self, she'll realize actually that wasn't that bad, and I can do it again. I think I can do that again. I don't know if that answers your question, but maybe this is something that we can discuss at the end with more parents sharing.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm also aware of time.
Yes. We've got more slides.
Right. So I'm going to move to older children now. So again, a lot of this, the fundamentals are the same as for younger children. So I'm not going to read through all of these bullet points. I think they're quite self-explanatory. So, we're reinforcing the rules. We're reinforcing communication. We're reinforcing not making excuses for the child. This is where we really are enforcing good manners. A very important part of presenting oneself and how you come across to people are your manners, right? I mean, we all know what it feels like to meet someone who we think is rude, or, it's obviously not a good thing to do. So in our communication, in our presentation, by the time you have an older child, they should know what manners are expected, and they should be showing good manners. Again, no excuses. No, there's no excuse for, to not to show good manners and not to communicate. At this age, this is where, as a parent, you really should be starting to challenge your child in their thinking. This is where thinking is so important. It's time to challenge your child. Ask them what they believe. What do they think about A or B? Which one do they like better, X or Y? And why? Why do you like it better? help them to start to think for themselves and articulate what they believe in and what they think. Now, of course, most of what they believe in and what they think will come from you as parents, because that's what you're bringing them up to do, which is great. They will also be learning a lot of new things at school. They will be hearing things from their friends and their peers. Some of the things they hear may not necessarily be things you want them to hear, but they will be. And so they will have information coming in from everywhere. And that information we should help them to sort that information out and to discuss things. Do you think it's a good idea to be a vegetarian? Why? Why not? Etc. Right? This is the time for them to start thinking these things through. And you keep challenging them, keep asking them. If they say, yes, it's bad to eat meat because I don't want to kill animals, then you might say, okay, but there's a lot of protein in meat. How would we get our protein? I mean, you can talk to children in ways that sometimes are beyond what we think they can understand. So this is the time where really they're developing their personalities, their character, the things that they can talk about. We don't want to have children who have nothing to say, right? Children should have opinions. They should have things to say. So ask for evidence. Mindfulness is still important, especially, children getting older, becoming teenagers. I mean, it's really tricky, right? There's so many feelings, so many things happening to them. This is also the time to give specific and honest feedback. We need to make them feel secure. We need to make them feel loved. We need them to know that we are there for them, whatever happens. You fail, you win, I love you, whatever. They need to feel safe, but they need honesty from us as parents. So if they do something wrong, they need to know it's wrong. If they deliver a presentation that wasn't very good, don't say, oh, that was amazing, well done, you tried your best. Yes, it was amazing that they tried their best, but let's also talk about what it is that you think was not so good, because then we can work on that and we can improve it for the future. Be specific. Don't be general and just say everything is amazing, because it's not possible. It's not possible for everything to be amazing. Be honest, right?
I have a question here, also in relation to my kids. So my daughter is an avid reader, which is a great thing, but it does make her really tied to the visual phonetics of words. And I find that her pronunciation is terrible. Like she actually gets really common words wrong, like stomach instead of stomach, uncomfortable instead of uncomfortable, foreign instead of foreign. I've got so many examples. And I think she really struggles to not make these mistakes. And I don't really know how to improve her pronunciation. And admittedly, it's not helped by the fact that my husband and my son think it's really funny to adopt these mispronunciations into their vernacular. And so they repeat these mispronunciations and they become part of our family vocab. And so then she just gets even more confused. And I'm constantly reminding her, no, that's not correct. That's not correct. While they're still saying stomach. So, I mean, because you said it's good to give really specific feedback and not just say, oh, that's fantastic. If it's something like pronunciation or grammar or these things that you said earlier, don't be too overcritical of these things. And what's the right balance there? And how do you go about teaching a child, for example, pronunciation?
So I love this because there's a phrase out there. Someone has said that you can tell a reader by the way that they don't know how to pronounce the words. I actually really like that. I like that because they read it. They read it and they've never, they didn't realize that we've all done it.
Yeah.
So when I was talking about not correcting grammar and pronunciation, that was more for younger children.
Okay.
Obviously, as they get older, yes, this is the time. I mean, you don't want to be annoying and nitpick on everything, but this is the thing. If they say it at school or in front of a friend and that friend makes fun of them, they will never forget again, right? Because they will have been sort of exposed to someone outside the family who spotted that.
Well, in our household, they just get made fun of.
Right.
So that's already happened.
But
I don't know if this is a good way to deal with it, though.
no, it's fine. I mean, every family has its inside jokes and its inside funny things that they say. That's great. That's communication, right? That's your family communication. But as I say, as they go out into the world and start doing these things, you can't protect them from everyone outside. Some people are going to criticize them outside. Obviously, if you can protect them from some of that at home, that's great. But I think part of the I mean, for example, if she's doing a talk and she says a few words wrongly, I wouldn't, as she's talking, interrupt.
Okay.
But I would just keep track of those words. And then at the end of it, you can say, oh my gosh, that was so good. I really loved that part about this. And that was really funny, that section there. But, but that other section was maybe a bit too long. So maybe you could think about shortening that. Oh, and by the way to say stomach is stomach, not stomach.
Yeah.
Like you just package it into your feedback. Now she may not hear all of it.
Sandwich theory, right?
Kind of. But that's good because it is specific. It is specific, right?
Yeah.
And she may go out into the world and say stomach, and someone may say, "What's a stomach?" And then and then she'll be like, "Oh gosh, I should have listened to my mom," right? But yeah, I think at this age, it is time to correct. It is time to give specific, honest feedback. But again, you have to judge. There's nothing worse than a child trying their best and then having someone just criticize all of it.
Yeah.
So sometimes you pick your battles as well, and you focus on the key things rather than make them feel that wasn't. That was just too, all bad. You don't want them to feel it was bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the other really important thing here is do not compare your child to others. How hard is that? Very hard, right? We can't help it. Oh my gosh, when your child is 5 and everyone else can read and your child can't read and you think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my kid? I mean, nothing's wrong with your kid, right? Your kid just wasn't programmed to read at 5, etc. But this is so important. Even if we are thinking it in ourselves as parents, don't compare children to others. Actually, children don't compare themselves to others until a much older age than we think. They just don't notice. They don't. This is why children can make friends with any ethnicity, with, able-bodied children make friends with disabled children. They don't notice these things, right? But as adults, we zero in on comparison. We do it for ourselves as adults, but we do it for our kids as well. And try not to express that to your child. Try not to say, oh, look at so-and-so, they're so good. They stand up so straight, or they speak so clearly, or don't do that. And help your child be the best they can be themselves. Develop their own ability. They will later start to figure out for themselves, right? How to benchmark themselves against other kids, right? I mean, in a minute, I'll talk about speech festivals, but there's this really interesting phenomenon in speech festivals where it's a sort of lucky draw what position you are in the order. You could be first, you could be last, or you could be somewhere in the middle, right? And, sometimes kids love to be first because then they can just get it out the way and then they can relax and they don't have to be nervous for the whole event. Other kids like to go last because they like to watch the other kids and see what they do and learn from them.
Interesting.
So that requires a level of self-analysis that only an older child and a more mature child can assess, right? And actually it can be confusing because sometimes children will look at other children and other children will do things that, for example, gesture. Their piece may be doing it with no gestures, no official gestures. They're just speaking. But suddenly they see 2 children in a row waving their arms around in the air, and then they think, oh my gosh, maybe I should be waving my arms around in the air. And then it confuses them, right, from their own preparation. So, I mean, these are all things, but this is good. This is training, right? These are all the things that we need to help our children believe in themselves. Don't follow other people. Don't copy other people. Yeah. I've said don't compare, but I have put identify role models. What I mean by that is, people like a news presenter, for example, or, have a look at how this news presenter reads the news. It's quite interesting. For example, that kind of role model. I mean, I don't mean like comparing against, people that you know necessarily. Okay, so I'm going to just move through these. So how should my child prepare for an event? So we've talked generally about creating an environment for your child to be a strong communicator and a good presenter. Now, let's talk a little bit about specific events. So when do we need to present? We need, interviews, speech festival, exam, a talk to people, right? These are the kinds of events where your child is basically on the spot and is ideally performing in a certain way. So how do you help your child prepare? Discuss the assignment. What is it? What is coming up? Is it a competition? Will there be lots of people in the room? Do you have to memorize the piece, or do you have to read the piece, or are you going to present from cue cards, etc.? Or are you just going to talk to someone and have a chat, right? Will there be an activity involved, etc.? So just make sure you understand the assignment. That's really important. But chat about it. Don't make it into a huge deal. Just talk about it. Talk about it over dinner, over a few nights of dinner, about what's coming up. Make it part of your normal conversation. Just try not to make it into a big deal. Talk about the child's feelings. If your child doesn't care about it, a lot of children don't care, right? You as a parent probably feel worried because you think, oh my gosh, my child doesn't care. They're not going to prepare properly. This is not going to be good. That's a certain situation. And you might want to talk to your child and say, well, actually, there's going to be some people watching you. So people will see you doing this. So maybe you should think a bit more about how you can prepare for this. Or if your child is very nervous about it, talk to them about their feelings. Yeah, talk to them about their feelings and how they can perhaps not be so nervous about it. Maybe do more preparation, etc. The requirements really important. I don't know how many of the parents here their children have been involved in a speech festival. There is one thing that's really important. There's often the Hong Kong Schools Speech Festival is coming up in November, December, and I just want to make this point because this is often a mistake. There's a category called prose, which means memorizing a passage from a book, and there's a category called reading aloud, which is reading a passage from a book. So one is memorizing a passage and one is reading a passage. The reason they are two different events is because they are two completely different skills, very different skills. Memorizing something and reciting is a certain skill set. Reading is very different because you are actually expected to read the words from the page and present in a different way, a bit like a newsreader, right? A newsreader is reading the news. They haven't memorized the news. It's a different skill set. And what is taught in that is how to use a paper or a book to read it, but also to look up at the audience at times and to still engage with them. But it must be reading, not memorization. So I'm just making that point because it's a common mistake. And that's what I mean by understand the assignment. Okay, preparing in advance, practicing in role play, connection with the audience. A lot of encouragement from the parents, but please don't put your stress into your child. Don't put your desire to win into your child. Don't put your fear of public speaking into your child, right? Whatever it is, and we all have this. We can't help it sometimes. But because children are so sensitive to us, they know how we're feeling, right? So just try and let your child be who they are. They're not an extension of you in this particular scenario. And the other thing that I think is important is learning to live with discomfort, learning to feel uncomfortable, but knowing that it's okay. So obviously, many of us, adults included, would rather not do public speaking. It makes us feel uncomfortable, right? It makes us feel uncomfortable. And we don't like to feel uncomfortable. No humans want to be uncomfortable. But if you can get used to that feeling, and if your child can get used to that feeling and know that they can overcome it, every time they do something like this, it gets easier. It really does. It just gets easier and it becomes a good habit. It becomes a good habit for them. So, and discomfort can come from different ways. It could be join a sports team. It could be do a speech. It could be multiple things. But, or, you know, the lady who was asking about her child who doesn't want to say hello. She doesn't want to say hello because she feels uncomfortable. She doesn't want to do it. It's perfectly understandable, right? It's reasonable, but for her to overcome that will be a victory and it will set her up for future successes later. Definitely.
Joanna, I think this is an important point, because I feel like those feelings that come with stage fright that happen just before an event, if a child is preparing for an event and it may be the first one that they've really encountered that scared them so much, sometimes it's difficult for them to really understand if a parent is saying to them, you might feel feelings of discomfort. I think it's difficult. I think even in my mind now, it's difficult for me to imagine, okay, how does it feel to be really, really nervous? You know, it's unless you're actually in the moment and you're just about to present and you're in that panic state, it's sometimes difficult to really understand what that feels like. How do you deal with a child if you're the parent and you're watching that child and they're suddenly experiencing these really intense feelings of discomfort? What do you say to them, or what can you do to try to make them relax, make them okay in the moment with that feeling, that overwhelming feeling?
Yeah, I'll go to the next slide just so I have it up while I answer this question, because it sort of leads nicely into this. But preparation is really important.
Yes, yeah.
It really is, because there's nothing worse than going into something unprepared. I mean, if you feel nervous and you're unprepared, then it's the worst feeling in the world. And I mean, I've been there, we've been there, right? It's because you have something to be nervous about, right? You know, so I really would be prepared. Help your child do whatever preparation is required, whether it's memorization and practice. You know, don't just speak in front of mummy and daddy, but speak in front of grandma and grandpa, speak in front of a friend, like spread that circle wider. Yeah. So if you're doing a talk, if you're an older child and you're doing a presentation or a talk about something, practice with your cue cards if you have them, or practice with your props if you have them, or with your poster or whatever it is. And again, practice with someone who's a little, you know, outside mum and dad, because that will give you that sense of having to step up a bit. You know, I think the preparation side is so important. Now, of course, and this happens every year, for example, at a speech festival, there are some children who have prepared. They've memorized everything. They've had classes. They've told the poem to multiple people or whatever. And then suddenly it hits them when they get to the venue. Oh my goodness, this is what a speech festival is. I have to go and stand and say in front of these strangers, right? And they go to the front and sometimes they can't speak. They really can't. So in that situation, if truly the child can't perform, the best thing to do is to, you know, don't force them to stand there for a long time. There is a judgment call there. There is a judgment call there where you want to encourage them to do it, but they really just can't do it. Let them remove themselves from that stage. It's fine. It's fine. We all have to learn about failure. Now, I hate that word failure, but you know, whatever we call that, right? Freezing, whatever. We all have to learn about failure. Now, that lesson that they will learn then as a child is much better they learn that then than as an adult in a formal work presentation or something. That's why it's good. That's why it's good to do these events. That's why it's good to put your child out there. But sometimes it's not going to work for your child at that particular time. And that's when they need a whole lot of love and hugs and attention and praise for even having the guts to go up there, right? It's not the time for, but you've practiced so hard and you didn't do it. And okay. And again, our emotions as parents get involved. We really have to learn to control ourselves. It's not about us. It's about the child and their experience. Because it's like when you fall off a horse, you want your child to get back up on the horse, right? Because you don't want them to be scared of riding a horse. It's the same thing. It's completely fine. It's okay if you don't speak, right? You have to make them recognize that failure it happens to everybody. And it does. I can tell you it does happen to in different events, With our 3-year-old category at the speech festival, a lot of 3-year-olds stand up and they're so little, they stand up and they just go blank and they can't remember anything. It does happen a lot, but they've had that experience, and hopefully they'll come back next year when they're 4 and they'll at least have done it before, and they'll have, that experience of having done it before. So that does happen. It does happen. And we do have to deal with it as parents. But there are things, so the preparation is really important. Taking a breath before you speak. Trust me, that's such a good thing to do. So there are a few things that you can do to help yourself. One is take a deep breath. Because it physiologically actually calms you down. It slows down the adrenaline production and it calms you down. The other thing is, know what your first line is. Don't worry about the rest. If you're prepared, it will come to you, right? But just make sure you know what you're going to say first, even if it's just, hello, everybody, lovely to meet you. Even if it's just that, but know what you're going to say first. So take a deep breath and say your first words. Immediately, as soon as you open your mouth and speak, you'll feel better. It really does work. It really does work. In the same way as when that girl says hello to the security guard the first time, the second time, it will feel much better. Really, it does work. And then also, be natural. Be natural. You don't have to be a different person to do a presentation. You don't have to behave in a different, strange way, right? Yes, you may be saying a poem or a prose or giving a presentation about a certain topic, but be who you are. Tell the audience what it is that you want to tell. Speak in your, speak naturally. Be natural. Yes, and again, it's difficult for children, right? I mean, what does that mean? Be natural, right? But it just means be yourself and try and look at different people. Tell them the story. Tell them the poem. Discuss the presentation or whatever it is that you're doing. Tell those people. Look at them and tell them, right? Make connection with them. Yeah, make connections with them. And things like, it's all part of the preparation, really. But keep the sentences short if you're speaking. Don't use, if you've memorized a difficult prose, then there may be some difficult words, there may be some long words, but at least you've memorized it, right? So that will help you. But if you're creating a presentation of your own, use simple words, use short sentences to get through to the audience. And now I keep talking about being natural, and I just want to make one more point, because parents often ask me about gesture. So when you're presenting, should you use gesture? Or if you're saying a poem, should you use gesture? And I even have parents saying, well, I don't understand because the child who won didn't use any gestures, and etc. Right? Gesture is wonderful when it's natural, but it's very distracting when it's fake. Right? So if I'm talking and I use my hands, that's because that's how I talk. I like to use my hands. Or if I'm expressing myself in a certain way and I'm quite angry about something and I just happen to clench my fist because I'm angry and it's natural, that's wonderful because it adds to the color and the value of the presentation. But what is not good is when you add fake actions to words, thinking that it adds to your performance. So, and every examination board, every speech festival board, every communication authority that I have ever been connected with, and I've been connected with a lot of them, do not want fake gesture. So for example, if you're crying, if you're talking about a poem and the child is crying, do not do fake crying. It's so fake and it's so distracting. I don't know if that makes sense to people. If the child looks really sad because they're talking about a child that's crying, and they've really understood the meaning of the words, and they understand and they look sad, and maybe they even raise their shoulders and they're so sad about this. Now that is perfect gesture, because that shows that the child has connected with the words, right? And is sharing them with the audience. Yeah, they haven't just been memorizing some fake thing. So it comes back to the non-verbal thing, Christy, that you were saying. The best non-verbal cues and gestures are the ones that are natural. So allow your child to be natural. Really important.
Great.
Okay, yes, so...
Oh, no. I was about to ask. I was going to ask for your top 3 tips in terms of, a child that's about to get on the stage, but it seems like you're about to talk about that.
Well, these are just the key things that I would like people to sort of take away and perhaps think about. Make communication and presentation every day. Yeah, it's not for special events. Communicate everywhere. Incorporate it into your rules at home, your conversations around the dinner table, everywhere. On the bus, wherever you go, communication is important. It's a life skill. It is a life skill. You are giving a gift to your children now, if when they grow up and as they grow up, they feel comfortable and confident at communicating. Increasingly so. The world has become a place where we need to speak up to be heard, for people to notice us. It's very difficult now to be a very quiet person who just does our own thing, right? That's just not the way the world is these days. But as I say, you don't need to change your personality. You can be a naturally quiet person, but you need to know when to communicate and how to communicate when you have to. Allow your child to be themselves. Everyone's different. Everyone's different. Celebrate who they are, and then help them, based on who they are, develop the presentation skills that they need. Remember to listen. That's more of a message for us. Try and give our children the benefit of our time and help listening to them and what they're trying to communicate to us, rather than keep rushing them along and keep talking over them and telling them what we think they should be saying. Allow them to speak and listen to them properly. And then just this message about getting used to feeling a bit uncomfortable. Yeah, and sometimes we as parents demonstrate that, right? We are the role models. Our children see us. I don't want to jump into a cold swimming pool. That makes me very uncomfortable, right? But maybe that's something that I can do with my kid to show my kid, hey, this is something that I'm going to do that I would rather not do, but it's okay. And then after I do it, I'm proud of myself that I did it. I mean, you find your own examples, right? You find the things that you do in your family or that are important to your family. Your rules, your life, based on your rules, your lifestyle, the things that you might do as a family to feel uncomfortable sometimes, or you as an individual with your child to show your child that it's okay to feel uncomfortable at times. And I think this is a sort of more holistic view of looking at communication and presentation, rather than looking at specific preparation to be a good presenter. But I do feel very strongly that if you can create this environment, then your child will naturally evolve into a strong presenter and be able to have the confidence to do so.
Joanna, I'm aware of the time, so I wanted to give parents the opportunity to ask any questions. I know we missed an earlier question from Rosita, so I want to go back to that one, but also encourage other parents. If you've got any questions you'd like Joanna to address now, could you put them in the chat? Once again, that chat icon should be at the lower right-hand side of your screen, square with horizontal lines through it. So just going back to Rosita's question, she asks, how will AI affect our children's communication skills?
Okay, so this is such a great question, and of course nobody knows, right? But But I think the good thing about AI, if we use it correctly, is that it will do a lot of the tasks that we don't have to do. You know, we won't have to do a lot of these boring tasks anymore, right? AI will take some of that away from us. So a lot of the research, perhaps that we have to do, the work that's, I don't know, even sort of writing documents and contracts and all of these sorts of things, that work will actually be done by AI. So where do the humans come in? The humans come in because we need to still analyze the information. We still need to understand that research and decide if it's true or false. We still need to solve the problems. We may have the information much more easily at our fingertips, but it's how we use it. It's how we apply that information that is going to be important. And then how do we take the information to apply it? Well, we work in teams, right? That's how we work now. We work in teams. And most schools, yes, of course, you have to do exams by yourself and you have to fulfill certain requirements. But a lot of the time we are working in a team. And to be a good team member, you have to have something to offer. You can't be that quiet person who sits and doesn't do anything. Well, you can be that person, but it's not going to get you very far, right? And it's going to be very difficult for you if that continues as you get older and older and older. You know, universities now have participation requirements. You can't graduate unless you actively participate in the US. I don't know about other countries, but there is a participation requirement, right? So, and that's really tough if you get to 18 and go to college and suddenly you have to speak in class. That is scary. You know, so I think, and then back to the AI point. It's all the human skills that we bring that are still so important. And, you know, and the way that we interpret the information that AI generates.
I think this is really key. I mean, as a CEO of a technology company, I have to say the AI models that I've seen are only as good as the information that's being fed to them. And if you test some of these models, what is really interesting in the current form, they have no ability to be able to differentiate data that is true from data that's false. And the way a lot of these models work, I was looking at the Google equivalent of ChatGPT. It's called Bard, and I fed in a question and it spat something out, and I thought, that doesn't sound quite right to me. I checked it and it was actually incorrect. These models, if they don't have an answer, will make up an answer.
Yeah.
And that's what I find really interesting. So some of these models spit out incorrect information. So I think the role of humans, where there is exercising judgment, subjectivity, I mean, I think these contributions are not going to be diminished by AI anytime soon. So actually I see, you know, even more of an emphasis on communication skills, the higher order thinking, less emphasis on just pure knowledge, you know, understanding facts. It's a very interesting question. So I think we are out of time, unfortunately. If anyone has any last minute questions, now is your chance to put them on chat. If any of the parents out there are interested in, you know, activities such as drama classes, performing arts opportunities, that sort of thing, the Bizibuz platform, we have a lot of that for parents, and it's free for parents to join. Or if you're interested in hearing about other parent events, feel free to join us. I just put a link on chat where you'll be able to create an account and join us for free. Otherwise, Joanna, thank you so much for sharing this time and being so generous on a public holiday, no less. I hope everyone has found it really informative and that your kids benefit in terms of developing communication skills and presentation skills as a result. We will be circulating a recap, and we'll be sharing Joanna's materials through email. So you will definitely get these at some point over the next few days. I just see a question, will there be a replay link? Yes, there will. We will make sure to circulate that. So have a very happy Buddha's birthday, everyone. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Doris. Thanks, Rosita.